What's up, boys? DWG. We got one epi today. It's Friday. TGIF DWG unit. Big night last night in the NHL. No NBA action last night, and a couple series in the OHL come back. Lots to cover tonight, so let's get right at it. Toronto, Boston. Holy shit, boys. We got a series. Toronto goes on the road at TD Bank North, and they pull off a 4-1 win. After going down 1-0 in the first, they come back. Mitch Marner, what a snipe. And I was thinking today about that play where Marner scored an unbelievable penalty shot goal on Rask. And if you rewind it back, DeBrusk pushed Marner's skate. And my thought is this. Yes, it's easy to say go back and tell DeBrusk not to do that. In hindsight, that conversation might happen. A guy on a penalty shot doesn't have a guy chasing him, which means he has a little bit more time just to focus on the player he's up against, which last night would have been Tuukka Rask. Whereas if he's chasing him down, even if he's not touching him, the pressure coming from behind would force Marner to perhaps second guess himself or make a decision quicker than he would if it was a penalty shot. So I think in hindsight, even though DeBrusk gave up a breakaway, if he didn't touch him at all, I'm not convinced Marner would have scored. So that was a huge pivotal play in the game. And it doesn't happen very often, but last night it could have happened a bunch of times because I was busy at the restaurant, but every time I turned and looked at the TV, Toronto had another breakaway. I mean, what the fuck is going on with Boston's defense? And Boston got skated into the ground. Somebody tweeted out that Chara looks old and slow. He doesn't look old and slow. Chara is old and he is slow. It's not a matter of optics, it's a matter of fact. And I've never been a Charlie McAvoy fan. I think the kid is a little Pillsbury doughboy. I'm not a fan of Boston in general. I love the city, but the Bruins themselves I could do without in the playoffs. This is still going to be a long series, but getting a win on the road in game one is a huge psyche factor for a young Leaf team, and I think probably their fan base as well. But if you think for a second that you're going to walk in the first 10 minutes of Game 2 on Saturday night and just start lighting the lamp, think again, because the Bruins are going to come ready to play. They didn't play their game. They're a bit of more of a banger and smasher. And I think the big thing that you're going to want to look at is how are they going to approach the matchups, because they got last line change and they're matching up against Tavares and the Bergeron line, which frees up Matthews, who ended up playing, I think, the most of any forward last night, a little over 20 minutes. So, in any series, whether it's hockey, basketball, or whatever, it's always the team that usually wins is the one that wants it, but it's also, when it comes to coaching, it's the team that can make the adjustments and execute those adjustments. So I'll be really interested to see, especially with Boston having last change, what kind of adjustments they're going to make, because it wasn't just that line matchup. They were having fits against Toronto's fourth line, was skating them into the ground. They got to somehow bottle up the middle of the ice and slow Toronto down, because if you slow Toronto down, they're not going to push and forge. You're going to keep them to the outside. I've seen too many games this year where if you keep Toronto to the outside, they're a pretty easy opponent to beat. But that'll be interesting there. I didn't really get a chance to watch too much of the Washington game, but it looks like they squeak one out against Carolina, and certainly that might be a wake-up call for Washington. The fact that they were up 3-0, and almost like Tampa Bay the night before, they almost gave it up. So, there's lots of upsets going on. There's lots of teams that still think they got, after usually in game 1 and 2, if you go down, a team hasn't been broken yet. It's a thing where you get to a spot where you know the team is broken and they've been defeated mentally. And usually when you win a series, not always, but usually when you win a series, you've broken a team mentally before you've actually beaten them physically. So still early in all the series before that happens, but there's a couple huge games tonight where if teams don't win, especially some of these teams like Winnipeg and Tampa Bay, if they don't win, I'm less worried about Winnipeg or Tampa Bay, but if Winnipeg doesn't win at home, they're in big trouble. And when you go down 2-0 after being at home and you got to go on the road and you got to at least, you got to go to that next game. They always say just one game at a time, but it's tough. It's tough going. So there's some big games, even though it's only game 2. There's some real big games for some teams tonight. So the one thing I always laugh about after game 2 is if it's a split, you always hear, oh well, if it's a split tonight in Tampa, or if it's a split tonight and Winnipeg does win tonight, the narrative now becomes, oh well, St. Louis grabbed home ice, or Columbus grabbed home ice. That's what you're going to hear from media and reporters is they have home ice now, which basically means the series is a best of 5 instead of a best of 7, and the road team now has more home games than the away team in the series. But what doesn't change is the fact that the home team still has game 7, which is a huge game. So even game 5 too. All the odd game series. If you lose an odd game in a series, I think those, even though every game is the same, I think those are the ones that can end up swinging a series big time. And certainly game 7 would decide a series. So the last game from last night, just 3 games on the docket last night. Calgary. I did watch half that game, and that was a tight game. It was a 4-0 game, but it wasn't really a 4-0 game. If you look at watch the game, it was much closer than that. It was actually 0-0 halfway through the game, and the Flames score a goal, and then they get a couple power play goals, and they got an empty netter. So special teams was a big factor last night. I'm sure Calgary fans like the fact that Mike Smith got a shutout, so that's going to help his confidence. And just to go overall, good win, good feel for Calgary, and certainly a good win and good feel for Toronto. I know Leaf fans are probably waking up this morning probably feeling a lot better about themselves than they did 24 hours ago. So we'll see what happens as these series develop. Won't talk too much about OHL today because I know you guys, your teams are out, or maybe you're not super interested, but hometown Ottawa 67s won the triple overtime last night, defeated Sudbury 8-0, marching their way to the Eastern Conference Final. They're probably going to have a week off because Oshawa won last night to tie up their series in the other Eastern semifinal between Niagara and Oshawa. So that series is 2-2. So the 67s will wait the winner there. London Knights are back in London tonight at the Bud Gardens. They're going to be playing the Guelph Storm, looking to close out that series. They're up 3-1, and I mentioned yesterday about how important that series is for London to close out tonight, because if they don't, it could go to 7. And then Sault Ste. Marie staved off elimination last night, beating Saginaw, and they're down 3-1 in their series, and that swings right around, and they'll be playing again tonight in Saginaw. Saginaw will be looking to close that one out. And I think that probably lines up Saginaw and London for the Western Final, so that should be a pretty good series as well. What else? In other news, we talked about the Raptors yesterday a little bit. Haven't really talked about Chris Davis. Haven't really talked much about baseball in general at all. So Chris Davis, obviously, he's set the record for most games without a hit. I think it's somewhere around 48 or 49 now, which is incredible, because Chris Davis actually, a couple years ago, wasn't far removed from being a huge, heavy hitter. I think he had at least 40 dingers the one season, and it's frustrating. It's also interesting the fact that so the Oakland Athletics played They're in a series in Baltimore, and the Oakland Athletics actually also have a player named Chris Davis. It's spelled differently. It's spelled with a KH, RYS. You can guess his ethnicity by the spelling. But the Oakland Chris Davis actually hit 2 home runs yesterday in Baltimore. So Chris Davis, the road Chris Davis, actually has more hits in the Baltimore Stadium than the home Chris Davis, who's probably already played 20 games there. So I'm just hoping that he gets a hit, because the guy is actually a good guy, and it's just bad luck. He's hitting line drives right to players and all that kind of stuff. So Baltimore is another team that's going to struggle again this year. And there's lots of hype going around Vladdy Jr. His first game in Buffalo last night. I think he went 3 for 4, and he hit a homer. And now people are saying, well, when is he coming up? Well, he could be coming up anytime soon. I think it has more to do with the actual injury now, because the Jays have taken that CBA rule, and they control his rights till 2025. So that's already taken place. That part of it, where it's based on days going into a season, not games. So Vladdy Jr. could very well be called up in the next week or so. I'm not sure if they're going to right now. I don't know what the hell's going on with that, but it's kind of pissing me off. But when he does come up, it's going to be like a rock star treatment. Like, it's going to be a big deal. And I think when he does come up, I'm almost wondering if the Jays, knowing that the Raptors and the Leafs are stealing their thunder right now, if they keep them down in Buffalo for 2 weeks until they find out if these series go. And I know this sounds stupid, but they want, there's only so many dollars to go around for the Toronto consumer. And right now, playoffs would trump any regular season game, especially for a Jays team that's not a competitor. I almost wonder if they're waiting until maybe the Leafs, if the Leafs ended up losing, if the Leafs are out, and then they bring them up, because then they can start selling more walk-up tickets. And I know it sounds dumb, but don't put it past the Jays, because they would never say it, but they have huge attendance issues. And the thing that bothers me more than anything, and Shawzy's alluded to it before, the Jays are not a small market team. The Jays have a ton of money. Rogers has a ton of money. I know, because I see my fucking phone bill and all that shit. They're just not willing to spend, because they this whole new culture, super tank league, where you have to basically tank for 2 or 3 years and get all these draft picks. I never really liked the whole draft system in the MLB anyways. It's a bit of a crapshoot. It's somewhere between a legitimate draft and recruiting process for college or university in the States. It's just really, really messed up. So, and then you got to pay the players signing bonuses, or else they re-enter the draft the next year. It's just really, really messed up, and I've never really liked it. So, that's something to keep in mind when it comes to Vladdy and whether he comes up. What else? The Masters yesterday. So Weersy I think he was an even yesterday, which is pretty good for Mike Weir. If he ever made the cut, there's a lot of golf that was tightly contested. A lot of guys jumbled up in that top range. No surprise that some of the guys are up near the top, like Koepka and DJ had a good round, and some of the other guys that are up there. Jordan Spieth has really, really been struggling this year. Hasn't put his game together, and I think a lot of people were hoping that he could just kind of flick a switch, and that's not the case so far. I know he just really struggled yesterday. The last time I checked with him, I think he was +3 or +4. I didn't take a look at the leaderboard and where he was, but I know he had a tough round yesterday, and it doesn't look like he's probably going to make the cut, which is unfortunate. But there's a lot of other good players there too. Tiger Woods didn't lose it in the first day. Like a lot of guys and a lot of sayings, you can't lose a tournament in day one, you can't win a tournament in day one, but you can certainly lose it. And so, Tiger put a good round together. I believe he shot a 70 -2, giving him a chance, and today's another day. So you put together a couple good rounds here, and then you go into the weekend, with a shot, and you start pushing forward. You start attacking those par fives, and maybe you cut out a couple breaks with some putts on some fours, and